The eugenics of liberalism. Yeah, clickbaity. Absolutely. Definitely 100% clickbait. But I think I can justify it. Okay, first up, I'm obviously, okay, not obviously, but I'm definitely talking about classical liberalism. The philosophy developed in the early modern era to support capitalism in economics and to justify the transition of power away from the aristocracy and into the hands of the burgeoning capitalist class. All right. A lot of people have talked about the myth of meritocracy and blah, 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 blah. But I think that whole meritocracy thing is baked into liberalism in a way that is a lot more pernicious than is typically acknowledged, particularly by textbooks and so on. Now, I'm going to straight up admit, of course, I'm mostly familiar with the US, but I think what I'm about to say here in this next 5 seconds is true not just of the US, but of the UK, probably elsewhere. People who seek and secure political office in liberal democracies, established, founded on the philosophy of liberalism, um, are independently wealthy before they get those offices. And the more power those offices have, the wealthier those people are. And further, this is not an accident. This is deliberate. This is something that was baked into the system, especially here in the US, right? The founding fathers, these elitist assholes, came together, they scrapped the Articles of Confederation, they set up the Constitution because people were participating in direct democracy. They didn't want the poors to come after them, right? So they set up a system where wealthy elites would absolutely have the most power. You have to be middle class just to vote, and then you vote for the wealthy, and then the wealthy vote for people who get to sit in federal government. Then people in federal government come together to decide who gets to be a judge. I mean, it's just every step they remove more and more power further and further from the poors, right? I mean, liberalism, they called it that. It's not just about universal rights, but it that is part of it. And they called it that because they envisioned more freedom of movement between class and background and so on. What you're born into doesn't necessarily determine your lot in life. They generally believed in that meritocracy thing. But that meritocracy thing, it extends throughout their entire conception of economics, of society, of politics. The entire worldview is sort of consumed by this idea that some people deserve to rule, some people deserve to be ruled. And in liberalism, you demonstrate that worth just by having money. Okay, they boil it down to that really just that simple calculus. By virtue of having wealth, you have demonstrated that you are the kind of person who deserves to have power over others. By virtue of being poor, you have demonstrated that you deserve to be ruled. And thus it is a eugenicist worldview. Yes, the term eugenics came into vogue back in the 19th century after Darwin published his thing and racists got a hold of it and ran with it, right? There's always been ideas of breeding programs and making better people, but this is a eugenicist sort of thing. Some people are just better than others. And thus, it's not at all an accident that generation after generation after generation, the poor are ignored and have no access to the halls of power. It's pretty much impossible for someone to go from mopping the halls to walking the halls and making legislation. Okay, it's baked in, it's built in, it's deliberate. Okay, in a lot of places, oh dear, dog is chewing, and that's almost certainly going to show up on the. Not too much. In a lot of places, it's sort of a historical accident. People have power because their ancestors had power, and with power comes wealth. But in liberal democracy, it is deliberate. And I kind of want to point this out because I know, again, here in the U.S., we get a lot of propaganda about how wonderful and how freeing and how liberating our system is, and how we really ignore some of the darker aspects of it. And I think it's important to highlight this sort of thing, that the core of this philosophy includes this very dark, very unpleasant view of human nature. That some people are by nature better than others, worthy to rule or worthy to be ruled. And that's just one more reason that we need to dramatically change our society. And that I don't know that reform would be sufficient. That our system of elections, our system of voting, all of it is kind of deeply, deeply fucked. That the only way to ensure any sort of permanent change is really to scrap it all. I'm coming to think more and more that we really do need some sort of revolution. Not necessarily a violent revolution, though that's probably going to be part of it if we keep on the path we're going on, but we have to find some way to just get at the bedrock of how we run things. Because as it is, we are ruled by an elite. They will always look to their interests first. That's how the system was intended. That's how the system has played out for more than 200 years. We really got to fix things. Our society is at its core a eugenicist society. All right. I'm going to go ahead and make myself some dinner, feed the dog, then go hang out with friends.